There are few comic tales as tragic as Element Girl's, and depending upon when you entered comics, that may be the first tale of hers you ever read. Some people may have even encountered Element Girl before they encountered Metamorpho The Element Man, and they may have entered on the issue that she died. Element Girl has a short but interesting history that's worth exploring, and that's what we're going to do here today on Casually Comics. We recently talked about Metamorpho, aka Rex Mason, the Element Man. We were taking a look at what made him work and what made him stand the test of time, something that the Element Girl, Urania Blackwell, didn't do quite as well. Rex Mason debuted in 1965 in The Brave and the Bold 57, transformed by the radiation of a meteorite into the Element Man, while on a fetch quest to obtain the Orb of Ra. This was set up by his employer Simon Stagg, who was trying to break up him and his daughter Sapphire Stagg, so he wasn't meant to return, but he did. Created by Bob Haney and Ramona Fradon, Metamorpho would prove popular and spin off into his own self-titled series the same year as his debut in 1965. Like his intro issues in The Brave and the Bold, his own series would have a slight comedic and parody feel to it. It would largely parody adventure tropes, but would also play in some other genres as well, like romance and of course superheroes, because that was largely how he was presented. Remembering that that tone was present will play into how Element Girl is presented later on, decades later, so put a pin in it. Now, much of Metamorpho's lore remains relatively unchanged, and his supports for the large part remain the same and were brought forward with him, but not Element Girl. And that is interesting because she was introduced as an important part of his lore. So what happened? As always, first off, we need to discuss just who is the Element Girl and how did she come to be. The Element Girl debuted in Metamorpho number 10 in 1967 and was created by Bob Haney and Sal Trapani. Fradon had been coaxed back from maternity leave to work on Metamorpho in the first place, and so she would not remain on his solo series for the duration of the comic. Trapani is a solid replacement though, as he also has a very emotive style which works very well for this series, as it's a highly visual piece in terms of displaying the elemental powers and also the facial expressions of the characters. There's oftentimes little things happening in the background, and that still happens after he takes over. Now, the Element Girl's arrival is heralded on the cover itself. There she's also called the Chemical Doll, and inside the teaser page she's called the Element Doll. Of all those names, I think Element Girl is probably the best. Just in general, there's a joke that develops throughout the series that is Rex calling her a lot of pet names and she calls them back. There's lots of huns, babes, loves, but Rex in general does that to people. It's just a thing. It's something that I've not read as tongue-in-cheek, could come across as very condescending or something that does not age too well or something that could irritate. And even if one does read it that way, it could still prove to be not amusing to them, or they may still find it irritating. But just note that it happens, because that's also going to matter later on. Now, her entrance is very dramatic. In issue 10, Rex and Sapphire are getting married. Hooray! And this wedding also provides another example of how there would be these comedic moments just snuck in throughout, such as the running joke that her father, Simon Stagg, was obviously evil and just no one noticed. He just has all these evil henchmen doing things and no one cares. That proud father, like any average parent giving last-minute orders to the help, is he, the genius tycoon, Mr. Millions himself. Play, imbeciles. More food and drink. Guards, make sure no one crashes the gate. By Gadfrey, never let it be said that Simon Stagg stinted when his little girl got married. This wedding is dramatically interrupted at the "does anybody object" part. I can stop the ceremony, for I, Urania Blackwell, alias Element Girl, have need of Metamorpho. By Gadfrey, can it be an element woman? It then gets very Jerry Springer. Why, you hussy, are you telling my fiance he can't marry me? I'll yank that phony wig off you and— Oi! No wig yanking. Makes me nervous. Now, what's more important than this drama is the explanation that Element Girl gives as to how she came to be. And why. She says she volunteered to go into the same pyramid where Rex got his powers, and she was exposed to the exact same thing. She went in because she was a secret agent and she wants to take down a secret organization called Cyclops, which has a disappointing lack of one-eyed robots, gadgets, anything. They're not living up to their name. Cyclops by Gadfrey. Yes, as Urania Blackwell's secret agent, I'd sworn to defeat Cyclops, but my powers were puny against such a stingery and his hordes. There was only one answer: take on superpowers as an element woman. Okay, I dig, but what's this all got to do with busting up my marriage? Simply this: before you tie yourself down, I ask you to do one more mission for humanity as Metamorpho. Help me defeat Cyclops, or are you afraid? Afraid enough to let a woman do it alone? That's toxic. Also, yeah, it was a bit of a thing, the idea that if he got married, he'd have to stop superheroing. So one must know that this was Element Girl's choice. Again, pin for later. 3 pins. This dedication impresses Rex because he feels some kind of way about how he looks as Metamorpho. So for someone to do that deliberately, he feels is worthy of his respect and he should help her. Sapphire is understandably upset about being ditched at her wedding. Oh, Daddy can't. It's too awful to bear, being jilted on my wedding day. Make him change his mind.
There, daughter. You know even I can't change Rexy's mind when it's made up. After this job, we'll have a bigger and better wedding than this.
Sorry, I love how he just also calls him Rexy. Rexy goes off, and him and Urania go in disguise. They're human disguises. He feels there's more of this than meets the eye, and he's right, because when they get there, he learns that the leader of Cyclops, Stingery, a name that I have a really hard time saying for some reason, is her ex. And that adds a whole other layer as to why she did this to begin with, why she's so dedicated to bringing him down. But it's also interesting because when they go into the fight, she resists casting off her disguise for as long as she can. It seems like she doesn't want him to see her like that in this new form. It raises a kind of a kernel of a seed of a question of, is she actually okay with what she's transformed into? They don't dive into it, but it's something you could ask based on how it goes down.
You fiend, you would destroy the woman who loved you? What, Urania, you've become an elemental freak too? But why did you destroy the beauty I once loved? To destroy you, you criminal monster. And just watch what a female freak can do.
Yeah, I can see why this didn't work. She's all, I loved you, and he's all, you were so hot. The rest of the issue is dedicated to showing how well the two work together as they take on Cyclops, and Metamorpho helps show her some tricks. But at the end of the issue, despite being injected with the exact same chemicals, Metamorpho is fine, but Element Girl is dead.
Rex Mason, what are you doing with that female? She's dead. Maybe your daddykins here can bring her back to life, Saf. She deserves it after what she did.
Can Stagsy's genius revive the atomic doll? Does the Element Man need a feminine sidekick? Sapphire says absolutely not. What sayest thou, readers? Let us know. So the audience was asked what do they think should happen, and you know that means that there are letters, and you know that means I'm going to read some of them. Get excited. The next issue, 11, she's still dead. And Stag is trying to revive her, and Metamorpho is starting to think that maybe he has some feelings for her, I guess. Because, I mean, she's just like him, for real. She's literally him.
Oh, Rex, how can you do this to me? How can you spurn me, a flesh and blood, warm, loving, giving girl, for the cold embrace of that chemical witch? Mason, maybe you're flipping your molecules. You really love Saf, but admit it. This atomic doll has somehow gotten under your elemental skin.
They also start calling her the e-girl this issue, which just amuses me because of how the slang has evolved over time. I want her to start a Twitch channel now. Urania sits issue 11 out because she's dead, and they leave it once more in a question for the audience. Will the fabulous Element Man and the Element Girl ever react together again? I see you, pun. I like it. Is Urania really destined to spend eternity in a test tube? Only future issues of Metamorpho will tell. Read it ever, miss it never.
Well, Urania, baby, I did it, but I sure could have used your help. Still, I guess you're dead for good. And we'll never be a team again.
Look, he even put dead in quotes in his text. This comic gets me. Now, Element Girl's not in issue 12, but she returns in issue 13. And that means that the letters talking about her are in issue 12, and we're gonna read some. Get excited. But first, a truly unhinged letter that brings me joy. Dear editor, I just love Metamorpho. I think some fans should be shot for saying that Metamorpho is ugly. I think he's very cute, and I'd love it if you could get me a date with him. I'm 5'2" and a half, and I weigh 110. My measurements are 36, 21, 36. I have long blonde hair, natural, and green eyes. I'm 16 years old. Stop. Stop! My friends say I am prettier than Sapphire. Compared to me, she looks like Ma Ketty, Lynn Wilson. That letter is amazing. Just, oh wow. Dear editor, I like the Element Girl very much and hope Simon Stagg can revive her. Straight to the point, just getting it out there. Dear editor, Element Girl should be kept alive. Sapphire's not good enough. Element Girl is better. Dear editor, the Element Girl is a real kook. Get rid of her. Sapphire is much nicer. Dear editor, get Element Girl out immediately. She is uglier than Metamorpho. Boy, Lynn's gonna have words with you. So you can see there were some mixed feelings about how this should go, but based on the fact that she reappears in the next issue, they were most likely going to use her again. But when she returns in issue 13, some things have changed. The cover teases a battle between the two, but that's mostly cover bait. On the inner cover, she is teased as joining the side roster, which includes the recurring characters. Inside, she is revived because of some science things that happen with the villain. The important thing is that she's back. At the start, she seems to be teaming up with the villain. I hate Metamorpho for spurning my love, and Stag for keeping me in that capsule like a dead frog. This is a ruse, but it also recontextualizes her first appearance, wherein she was not in love with Metamorpho, nor did she push that. They worked well together, but that was about it. It wasn't any kind of really romantic element. The idea that that could happen was there, but they didn't push it so hard. Now it's just wham in your face. From this issue onward, they work hard trying to craft this love triangle for Metamorpho. So even though he looks as he does, he too can have the problems of Archie Andrews. And that also in and of itself is a bit of the joke. joke. Zorb is in the penthouse posing as Stag. I only pretended to fight you to gain his confidence. We were born to be together, fight together, love together. Oh boy, one thing at a time, doll. First comes the fighting, because this Chemo Creep's buddies might pop up any second. So the crux of the appeal of Metamorpho and Element Girl is that they're the same. They have the same powers and they look the same. In theory, no one should be able to understand them but each other. This idea could work, but it's just thrust upon you. It's something that would work a bit better if they built up to it a bit more, especially because Metamorpho has such a firm foundation with Sapphire. And so a lot of the drama ends up feeling a bit manufactured. And yet it didn't have to, because there are still valid concerns here. It's very reasonable that Sapphire could conceivably feel insecure about a woman who could completely understand and relate to what Rex was going through on a personal level, plus go out on missions with him. Rex was shown to admire Urania's moxie and her attitude, which was a bit different than Sapphire's. Even though Sapphire would also go out there and do stuff, she had a different base personality. And as for Urania, you could have played that a couple of ways. She could have had a genuine fondness for Rex that either started right away or grew over time. And even if it started right away, it didn't have to be like, we need to be together right now. You could also have taken a bit of a sadder way, that she feels that Rex is the only person she can be with because of how she looks or because of how they look, that they're just meant to be, but not in a yay, we're meant to be, in a oh, I guess there are no other choices, because no one else would accept us, even though that's proven not to be true. As of issue 14, the Element Girl is officially added to the side as a support character, and her and Rex are stopping crimes as a duo, and we're in full love triangle mode. Yes, for those looking at the screen, it's a new day and a new time. Moving on, love triangle.
When Rex sees me in this wedding dress, he'll beg me to marry him. He'll forget all about that chemical witch Element Girl who's turned his poor silly male brain. La-da-dee-dum, Sapphire, you're out of sight.
Sap, Urania, what gives?
Recognize the dress, darling? Reminds you of something? Like this little bikini I dreamed up, Rex? Make you think of a moonlight swim, a girl, a fellow, romance? Why, you elemental hussy! You dare throw yourself on my Rex? I'll scratch your cobalt eyes out!
Your Rex, he belongs to me. We're both freaks together. We'd make the greatest fighting, loving team the world has ever known. But in all seriousness, this love triangle doesn't really work for one very strong reason. Now, while some fans didn't feel that Sapphire was good enough for Rex, or didn't like that she was a rich girl who sometimes fell into like socialite tropes of enjoying the finer things and the like, none of those things really matched what happened in terms of how she treated Rex. In terms of their relationship, she wasn't superficial at all. But she stuck by Rex, never judged him, encouraged him to become a superhero, made him a costume, genuinely loved him as Element Man and as Rex. So she loves Rex either way, no matter how he is, and is just very loyal, and they have a very solid relationship. So there's not really a compelling argument for Element Girl aside from them having the same power set. In the triangle, each option is supposed to present something the other doesn't, and also have unique drawbacks. But that doesn't really come through in this instance. And part of that may be because of the lightly satirical tone, which in this case makes this plot point not the strongest. Although again, mileage is going to vary. As you saw from some of the letters, some people just did not like Sapphire. Element Girl appeared in almost half of Metamorpho solo series, and most don't remember her, or if they do, it's not for that. The romance gets awkward and it comes to just take over her character. She's still capable and has a more grounded mindset, but then her personality just becomes, gotta get Rex away from Sapphire. The pacing of the relationship starts to get awkward around this period as well. Issues 16 and 17, the last two issues, do try to change things up, but it's very abrupt. 16 starts with Sapphire just marrying somebody else, just some guy, it's Wally Bannister. And then all of a sudden, Rex has no dilemma. He doesn't want to be with Element Girl at all. What? He never did. Hi Urania, what brings you here? Love does. With that rich witch gone, we two freaks can have a life together. I'll make you happy, darling. I know I can. It's no-go, baby. Forget it. Cool it. I'm no good for you. I'd ruin you too, like I've ruined everything else. Please, Rex, stop pitying yourself. It's a waste. We may be freaks, but we're unique, special, and we can do marvelous things that humans can't. Yeah, doll, all they can do is ordinary stuff like marry, raise kids, have a few laughs. No, won't work. See you around. Oh, must you break my heart too, Rex? Rex? Well, despite this, she helps him escape from Stag anyway, and from there things just move at a breakneck pace. Next issue, he's being accused of murdering Sapphire's husband on her honeymoon. Element Girl helps him clear his name, but Sapphire didn't stand by him. That means Element Girl is the girl for him. They'll go off and have all kinds of adventures. Yeah, except the book was canceled after that issue 17 in 1968. And when they brought Rex back in Brave and the Bold 101 in 1972, Element Girl, who's that? I don't recall. It was the same author, but he dropped Element Girl hard. They act as though those last two issues in 1968 never happened. And that was the end of Element Girl for decades. Until the Sandman story Facade, which is where many know her from. It's not a happy tale. Get ready for feelings. Enter Neil Gaiman and his work Sandman, which would often incorporate lesser known, forgotten, or cast aside elements from DC canon in interesting and often dark ways. One of the reasons Urania would be used seemed to be because no one really remembered her. Gaiman talked about this a couple of times while discussing the story. He stated, "There's one called The Death of Element Girl, in which Sandman probably won't even appear. He might appear, I don't know. That is death and an old DC character called Element Girl, who nobody remembers anymore." He also said this about her. "Yeah, the Lady Metamorpho, so famous she never made it into the Who's Who. Anyway, she's in there. Terribly sad story." He's right, at the time she was not in the Who's Who. Ouch. So just how did he use her? Element Girl, or Element Woman as she's called sometimes, even though there is another character named Element Woman, initially appeared in Sandman 20 in 1990, helmed by Gaiman with art by Colleen Doran, inks Malcolm Jones III, and colors Steve Oliff. The story is told from the perspective of Blackwell, the former Element Girl, who is sunk deep into depression and lives a life of profound loneliness and anxiety, where she almost never goes out and only talks to a handler from the agency she used to work for. It's not made clear what exactly happened or why she's no longer working. And there's a meta element of sadness to that that's kind of worked into the plot itself, as if her being canonically forgotten is just this extra layer that's percolating on the surface for those who are aware of it. But the story works without it, but if you are aware of it, it just adds that whole extra level. This because one can consider how she was just cast aside. There are so many questions to explore there if one wants to tie it back to canon. The story doesn't, but for those who are aware of it, they can think of things like, how did her relationship with Rex dissolve? Why did she stop superheroing? What we are presented with allows us to extrapolate. It's clear that she's grown more unstable mentally over the years, and her powers are also a bit wonky and something she's not entirely comfortable using. And she's keeping the remnants of her own faces around her apartment. There's just a lot of symbolism and unsettling things happening, but at the same time, it's just very profoundly touching. The entire story is basically about her desire to kill herself and how awful and like a freak she feels. The lore of the pyramid is added to a bit to incorporate the sun god Ra a bit more than he was in the original, but that was part of it. But they highlight it more here as Ra transforming mortals to wage his battle with the serpent Apep. Element Girl ends up having a lengthy discussion with Death, detailing the many ways she wishes she could die or has tried to end her life, but hasn't been able to. Her powers render her essentially immortal. While Death assures her that she will die, it's just going to take her a lot longer than other people, she says that she can't wait that long. She just can't exist like this anymore. The art in this story really lends itself well to just the tone. It's just a very good match. It's a strong meditation on pain and death and choice. This story is very strong, definitely worth a read, and you don't need to know anything about Metamorpho for it to work. Knowing more does make some of the references have a bit more weight, but also knowing more makes you aware of what was changed. There are some little things, like Urania in this continuity was forced to take this form, which creates a very different dynamic than her choosing it. Not that she couldn't end up in the same place, coming to eventually regret her own decision, but those are two different paths and give one two very different things to contemplate. Different themes and elements to explore, basically. And the route that Gaiman chooses is a bit more stereotypical and well-trodden. But in general, this is just a tragic end to this character, who was introduced to add a bit of fun and variety to the lore. It's not falling into edging things up just for edge's sake, which could happen a bit as this was the Dark Age, and sometimes you would see Silver Age concepts return, but more extreme or sad or gritty or dark. It's no, remember when Batman met an alien superpowered version of himself on a planet with a silly costume that had powers like Superman? Wasn't that fun? Well, now that's a part of his psyche he hides from himself to stop him from killing everyone. This has more of a through line to the original character. The feelings and traumas brought forward feel like they could relate to the character as she was presented in the Silver Age. There's one part of the story that just has always haunted me. It's when after a disastrous outing outside of her home, she returns and she tries to call that one handler who she talks to, the one person who she looks forward to talking to, and she's told that he doesn't work there anymore. And it's that moment that helps her crystallize her decision. After she talks to Death and is told how to ask Ra, the sun god, to end her life, which he does, and her last expression is one of pure joy and gratitude, the agent calls her to try to talk to her. And it's just this moment of how sometimes people think that no one cares or there's no hope, and then maybe there was, maybe there might have been. Maybe one could be wrong. Maybe shit could have gone on and turned things around. And I don't know, more than making the faces that fall off and the symbolism there, that moment just always stuck with me. It's a story that can really resonate emotionally on a lot of levels. It's a very strong story, and it's kind of stuck as the through line for Urania, even into the New 52 and beyond. When they did eventually add her to the Who's Who, largely because Gaiman did this was the backstory they gave her, and that just continues when she shows up. And the question is, do you think it should be, or do you think this is a character that deserves to come back and have a little fun? The thing is, it is a good ending, even if it is devastating.
Not all endings have to be happy. But this wouldn't be the last time the character was used. Gaiman would bring her back when he was working on a little outing called Wednesday Comics. Wednesday Comics was a 12-issue series that ran in 2009. Each issue, the characters that ended up being used got 1 page each, a part of a story with creators taking on the character they most wanted to. Gaiman wrote a Metamorpho story that very heavily focused on Element Girl, and in it you get to see his take on an update of the dynamic from the 60s. It's interesting. Reading it made me ponder if he enjoyed the humor from the 60s or not, or if it's just that translation of trying to get that style into the modern era. I think I understand why Gaiman made the changes, but they don't marry well on top of the humor, although that may be because I'm familiar with the 60s run. Without that background, this may play better or just differently. Also, I have no place to put it, but there was a brief Element Girl sighting, it seems like in Future State. Back to Wednesday Comics. The type of humor is very different, and Element Girl is also different. This Element Girl has no time for Rex. She's a no-nonsense CIA agent, which was kind of how she started in all fairness, but there is a hint at a kind of romantic backstory, but that she's over it. And she also says directly not to call her pet names. The pin. Remember the pin? The pins, they're all coming. So how Element Girl was characterized, there's very much a pushback against it in these Wednesday Comics presentations. It's very much taking the stereotypical way that she was presented and just not adhering to it. But they stick to it for Sapphire, interestingly enough. Sapphire gets thrown to the hounds in this outing. For example, here's Urania, or an element woman, Mr. Stagg. Urania Blackwell, CIA. Hello, Rex. You look good. And here's Sapphire. And Freak Girl, the star of Atlantis, it's jewelry, and that means it's mine. Miss Blackwell, you're a remarkable woman. I wonder, that is to say, have you ever thought about entering the private sector? I'm afraid my private sectors are off limits, Mr. Stagg. Even to you. Meanwhile, with Sapphire, why can't the spunky lug see how much I love him? Also, I put that diamond everyone has been after into my cleavage while they're all distracted. Ooh, it's shiny. Also, yes, I see Java on the toilet. The attempts at humor are there, but they're less focused than the 60s where they were targeting specific tropes. It's an odd outing though, especially because she was pretty forgotten. So for people who pick this up, this is gonna be pretty niche, very inside baseball. So of course, you know, I appreciate it. Why so mean to Sapphire? I guess we know which side Gaiman was on the love triangle. Or not, you know what they say about assuming. Don't do it. This story also does not fill in the gaps of how we got from there to Sandman, but that's not its function. And so that is the story of Element Girl. She was introduced and never really found her footing, and the spot that they put her in didn't really lend her any staying power. It allowed her to fade into obscurity and eventually be brought back in a skillful and heart-wrenching conclusion to a tale that many fans had never seen the start of. Personally, I think keeping it as her choice to go get the powers and take on the mission and then still be abandoned by the agency would have been stronger, but that's just my opinion and a minor nitpick. There's so many questions that could have been explored with this character. Those just kind of live in the gap while she was forgotten. Would her and Element Man have worked long term, either in canon or outside of it, as a concept that people gravitated towards? Did she love him? Was there space for two such similar characters with the exact same design? Was the way that this ended up actually the most meaningful way the character could have been used? Even without being laid out explicitly, the Element Man and Element Girl stories parallel each other in a sad way. While Metamorpho thrives because of love and community, Urania wilts as she's rejected by all, including people she assumed would accept her. To be rejected by the one person who knows exactly what you're going through. Ouch. Element Girl always leaves me in a contemplative kind of mood. And now I invite you to do the same. Brood with me. Or just contemplate how different the lighting is, because I had to do this in parts. Were you familiar with the Element Girl? Were you aware of her from the Silver Age? What do you think of her, and how do you feel about how her story ultimately played out? Would you have done something different? Would you bring her back? Omniverse, whatever it is we're doing time of recording? Do you feel that her end was actually gratuitous and emotion porn? I want to hear all of the opinions. Tell me things down below, and while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this tornado to discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye. I don't know why I did that. That was almost like a salute. Bye-bye. Also, for those of you who stayed to the end, what is it? What's happening over? Oh. It's all coming together. Bye for realsies.